If you're just tuning in, we're talking with Alfie Kohn, the author of
The Homework Myth, Why Our Kids Get Too Much of a Bad Thing. And it is just so important. And he's also encouraging us to organize. And if you're feeling this pressure, like we're feeling this pressure, please send an email to bigbreak@momstown.com, and also make sure that you sign up for our newsletter, because we're going to be talking a lot more about this topic in the days and months and years to come, probably.
Right.
At momstown.com.
Yes, and Alfie, are you noticing people in communities organizing and trying to educate parents and educators about this?
Well, parents are educating themselves and then organizing. And yes, I've heard of parents doing this from California to Connecticut and across parts of Canada too, where parents are suddenly realizing homework is not like the weather. It's not a fact of life that you just have to live with. It represents a largely misguided set of decisions. Many educators, by the way, understand that homework doesn't help. It's a pain in the butt to them. They often find that it gets in the way, but they unfortunately encounter parents who demand homework or more homework, sometimes amazingly, even in elementary school. There is, I just want to make this clear, not a single study has ever found advantages to assigning any amount of homework in elementary school. And if we're talking about kids in 3rd grade and below, if the homework is something other than read a book you love, something is very wrong with what's going on in the school. And we as parents need to stand up for our kids. Most of us want our kids to develop intellectually, academically, but, you know, I'm a parent twice over. I want my kids also to grow emotionally and socially and artistically and physically. My view is 6 hours a day of academics is enough. And besides, it's not for the school to determine what my children and I do after the kids get home from school. That's for families to decide. And it's incredibly outrageous for the schools to tell my children, here's what you must do on the weekends, on the holidays, even over summer vacation. So given that there are these value-based objections to an academic focus that extends right up until kids go to sleep, and the lack of empirical support for homework, we have to do more than just complain about how much. We have to recognize that for our kids to develop and nourish that intellectual curiosity where they're excited about ideas, the idea of worksheets brought home in backpacks is simply unacceptable.
Well, now, Alfie, what happens when you are in a school and all the parents are doing too, you know, the kids. Actually, what happens is the parents end up doing homework too, projects and everything. So, what happens though when you're doing all this and the school is succeeding successfully on this standardized testing and everything, and so then all of a sudden the school district comes to you and says, "Well, look at our school. We do 2 hours of homework. This is the standard, or an hour, or whatever it is, and our test scores are up here, so it's working."
Right.
What do you say to that?
There's several problems with this. Problem number one is that standardized tests measure what matters least. Research finds that sometimes some of the smartest, most interesting kids with the best minds do not do well on standardized tests, whereas some kids who are not really great thinkers but happen to be gifted at test taking do test high. I would never look at a standardized test result to determine the quality of a child's learning, of a teacher, or of a school system. I've written a whole book just about that. We can talk about that another time. The second point is, even if you care about standardized tests, they are mostly measuring affluence. 80 to 90% of the difference in test scores is a function of how rich the parents are and how much education they've had. It tells you nothing about the quality of the learning and teaching in the classroom.
But, okay, so here's a point. We're all working to get our children into a good college because the colleges look at their test scores, the SATs, their GPA, etc. I mean, it's on the university level.
Well, there's, again, 2 ways to respond to that. One is to ask, is that really on your top 10 list? Because when I ask parents and teachers, what are your long-term goals for kids? Pushing them into a selective, competitive, expensive college doesn't show up on the list with the issues that do surface, like I want my child to be happy, ethical, a lifelong learner, compassionate, responsible, curious, and so on. So we have to decide, is it worth punishing children by making them less interested in learning and taking away much of their childhoods so we can brag that they got into Stanford or Yale? The second question is, even if you really are pushing for things like test scores and college acceptance, there is no evidence that homework is necessary. It's not just that in my book and after my book, I report on individual teachers, many of them at the high school level, who give no homework at all. It's that I can point you to whole schools that are saying no to homework with fabulous results.
Awesome.
If you know that's true, why would you let your child waste time with worksheets when you can join your neighbors and respectfully approach the educators and say, I'm sorry, after school hours, especially for a child who's only 8 or 10 years old, is for us to decide. We'll be reading and riding bikes, playing games. My child will be making friends and hanging out with them and just chilling out after a full day in school, as we need to do after a day of work.
Well, and it's also, I mean, this stress level is not just about homework also not proving to be helpful in helping with tests and all that and helping them become lifelong learners, but it really, stress does horrible things to a child's body. A girlfriend of mine who, we're in the same class, and her son was doing 2 hours of homework, chronic fatigue syndrome, and we're just down to a minute left in this. What do you say about the stress that's happening to these kids?
It varies depending on the kids, how much homework, what kind of homework, how the child feels about herself, how the parents, get involved in all of this. But yes, any stress. You don't have to have a child who is reduced to tears and fatigue to see there's a problem. Because even the kids who seem to be dealing okay with the homework almost always view homework as something they want to have to put up with to get past so they can finally be done with it and get on to things they enjoy. That may explain why the research finds homework isn't even academically beneficial.
Okay, well, you know, Alfie, this is amazing information. I think we're going to have you as a guest on the show again.
All the time. AlfieCone.com is the website.
.org, actually.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you, Mom, for joining us today, and hope this has helped you. Be sure to go to momstown.com for more.